All right, in our video walkthrough today, I'm going to show us how we can set up our fail alerts, or technical terms, Apex exception email in Salesforce to go over to our Slack. Basically, what we're trying to do here is when you're working on a process, right, or a flow, or something doesn't work out the way that it was intended to in Salesforce, you get this really, really long email, and that's called an Apex exception email, or a fail alert, right? Letting you know, hey, your process didn't run. This is why it didn't run. Here are the details of how to do that. And it's great because it gives you some insight. But what happens here is it sends it over by default to the last person who modified that process that just failed. Which, like I said, it's great that you get insights, but it's bad if you work on a team because you're the only one receiving it. And then from there, if you're like in a meeting and you can't get to it right away, or somebody else needs the information, you kind of have to guess of like, who was the last person to modify this? Who do I need to reach out to send this to me, to forward the email? So one way to get around that is by hooking up to your Slack. The reason we want to do this is so that we can speed things up as a company, as a team, to be able to diagnose the problem and fix it, right? I think that's like obviously the ultimate goal when something fails is you want to know why as quickly as possible, and then you want to solve it as quickly as possible. So being able to send it to a place where everybody can see it, regardless is, if I'm in town or I'm out of town, I'm in a meeting, I'm working on something else, I'm confident that my entire team can see this. So that's what we want to go over. And that's kind of the context of why we would want to hook it up to something like Slack. So if you've used Slack, that's probably common terms that I'm using here. If you haven't used Slack, Slack is just a communication tool. It allows you to chat, or IM, if you will, to people throughout your company. And they have these things called channels. A channel allows you to set something up where it can be public or private to a specific amount of people. And what you do is you create a new channel, you come in here, you can name it whatever you would like, give it a description, and then, like I said, make it public or private. If it's private, you'll invite people into this channel and then they can see whatever's posted in that channel. So I actually am going to partly show you in like my test environment how I did that. And then I'm just going to walk through some documentation with you on a blog post, because I actually have a free version of Slack. And if you have a free version of Slack, you can't do this. You'll need a paid one in order to add in the email app. So keep that in mind. So I'm going to then move over to my blog post because I think there's some sensitive stuff in there that I probably shouldn't be sharing. So I've made sure on my blog post there's nothing sensitive there. So we'll just jump over there and I'll walk you through the rest of it. So let's go ahead and jump over here. This is actually going to be my portfolio blog. You can get over here and check out anything as far as Salesforce tips go, business applications like what we're doing now with Slack. And then I also have a podcast about FAQ, around Salesforce, thoughts around things that have helped me with my career. So tons of different things on here that you can get in here and check out and scroll through and look into and hopefully help you out. So that will be there along with this actual blog post. So I already have all the details up, of what the use cases could be, what we're trying to accomplish here. So jumping right into it, the very first thing you want to do is you want to click here. By clicking here, it's going to bring you over to this different little FAQ or help center for Slack. This is going to help you set up the process. I would scroll down to this section here that says connect the email app to your workspace. And then from there, you'll get a good idea of what you need to do. This one up here is a little bit different, so you can kind of ignore that. That's just another way to go about doing it. I felt like the application was the easiest, so that's the one we're going to use. So you'll click on this, the very first step, right? Head over to the email app page. When you click on that, it's an actual app that will bring you to. And if you're signed into your Slack, it's going to obviously allow me to add that to my Slack. If you're not signed in and you want to go and find how to get to this app a different way, let's jump back over to our Slack here. You'll click this down arrow, and then you're going to go hover over tools. There's customize, and it'll say your company's name, right? So customize this. It brings us into more of like the settings area of Slack. And from here, I will click on configure apps. And then there's an app directory up here that I would look for. And I would just type in email. And it's this very first guy, this blue logo. You can click on it. And then that's also how you can get there to add this. So I'm obviously not going to add it because it's already been added. But that's how you'd add it. So the very first step is that you want to add that to your Slack, right? Number 2, add it to your Slack. Number 3 is choose the channel that you want it to go to. And then we're obviously adding that email integration. So let's jump back over to the blog post from here on out. And I'll just kind of walk you through these screenshots since this was done at my company. So once I click that and get into the integration settings, which is when you click on the app and you add it, it brings you to a next page. That next page is going to look like this. And it will say, okay, like, what do you want to do with this? You're setting up this integration, you're creating a new one, right? Like, what do you actually want to do with this thing? And the very first thing is it actually auto-generates this email address. So you're not actually putting in anything here. If you're familiar with like setting up things in Zapier, it's kind of like when you want to go set up a new webhook, it gives you the email address to say, hey, this is what's going to hook it up to Zapier. It's the same thing here. It gives you a pre-populated email address and says, if you ping this address, it's going to go through this integration for you. So it gives you this pre-populated little email address. And that's going to be important for us to use in just a minute in our Salesforce instance. So kind of keep an eye on that. If you want to copy it to your clipboard, I would do that. Number 2, it's asking you where you want this to go. So in my actual company, I created a new channel and I named that channel Salesforce Fail Alerts. And then from there, I actually just had set it to private like I'd mentioned earlier. I invited in just my Salesforce team since nobody really needs to see this except them, and then had it hooked up there. So anytime that this failed, it's just going to come into our channel titled Salesforce Fail Alerts so that we can check that information out. So if you don't have a channel, you can always create one and then hook it up there. If you have one that's existing that you want it to go to, that's what this does. It allows you to choose the channel. You can put in a descriptive label if you wanted to, letting you know what's going on. You don't have to, it's optional. And then you can also put in a name. So mine just says email. I just left it. I think that's the default value. But if you wanted to name it something like, I don't know, Salesforce Fail Alert or New Alert or whatever it is, right? Like you can name it whatever. And then when it rolls into your Slack, that will be the title of this little integration. Maybe a better way to see that this one's not the same thing, but you see here how it says Zapier. It would be the same idea. So you can modify like the logo, you can modify like what this says. So mine just says email and has their email logo. But you can name it to whatever you want if that is interesting to you. So that's what that one is. So take it or leave it there. You can obviously add that new image, like I said, or select an emoji. As you saw in that example that I just had, I had a potato, but you could put in also whatever you wanted that made sense. You could put like one of those caution emojis maybe so that it's like, hey, we have another alert, right? So it just adds some customization, a little more fun to it that way. And then obviously at the very end, it's going to give you, hey, this is like what it's going to look like. So you see here how I have my email. See how I left the logo the same? The logo's the same here. So it gives you an idea of like what it's actually going to show there. You'll save your integration. You're done in Slack. So we're completely done there. It's pretty cut and dry and fairly straightforward of like how you do that part of it. Moving on to the next step though, we do have to hook this up somewhere. So if you didn't before, make sure you grab this little address because we're going to need that. And then what we will do is we're going to jump over to our Salesforce instance. And if you type in Apex exception email or Apex and click on this guy here, it brings you into actually allowing you to update or customize where you want these emails to go. So if we wanted, we could just send it to a specific user, or you can do this thing called external email addresses. And that's where you're going to punch in this Slack address that it just popped up for you, the one that you just copied. You'll put it in here and hit save. And then that way it's saying, when this thing happens, when we have this process fail, hit this email, and then that email integration that we set up is actually going to send it to a Slack channel for us. And that's all you'll do. You hit save there, and then once you have it done, this is actually what it should look like. So very similar to like this guy over here. Where is he? So very similar to how this rolls in. It's going to be doing that same idea on our fail alerts. It will say, hey, and this is an example from my company. We have a process builder titled Opportunity Management, and it will let me know, hey, this is what happened. And now it's there for everybody to see, everybody to diagnose and figure out what's going on with it.